Jordan Chase stared at his computer screen, the harsh office lighting making his eyes burn. Another Tuesday at Millbrook Data Solutions. Another 8 hours of data entry and pretending to care about spreadsheet formatting. He rubbed his temples, trying to ward off the headache he could feel building. The same headache that had forced him to leave Brian's birthday drinks early last week. His coworkers had teased him about being a lightweight, but Jordan knew it wasn't the beer. These headaches had been coming more frequently lately. Time seemed to blur at the office, but then, didn't everyone zone out during endless spreadsheet work? His cubicle walls were decorated with the usual office worker debris, a calendar he'd stopped updating in March, a photo from last year's company picnic where someone had mistaken him for Sarah from accounting. They did have similar builds and the same haircut. Sticky notes with passwords he wasn't supposed to write down. Something felt off lately, though he couldn't put his finger on what. Last week, Sarah from accounting had mentioned a conversation he didn't quite remember. Yesterday, he'd surprised himself in the break room, discussing technical details with the new IT guy that he hadn't realized he knew. And then there were the dreams. Always the same setting. A dimly lit room, walls covered in papers and photos, red string connecting points on a map. He'd wake up with his heart racing, reaching for a notebook that wasn't there, trying to hold on to fragments that felt important, but slipped away like smoke. The True Crime Forum tab minimized in the corner of his screen beckoned. Just 5 minutes, he promised himself. He needed a break from expense reports. Besides, something about these cases felt important, though he couldn't explain why. The same way he couldn't explain how he'd known exactly where to find that accounting error last month, or why he sometimes caught himself checking the exits whenever he entered a room. The Alex Novak Files subreddit was buzzing with new activity. Someone had found archive footage from one of the missing journalists' last investigations. Jordan clicked the link, then frowned when a warning popped up about the video being age-restricted. "That's weird," he muttered, reaching for his coffee. His hand knocked against the cup, but somehow caught it before it spilled. A quick, fluid movement that surprised him. Like last month when he'd caught Dave's daughter before she could fall during the office family day. Everyone had called him a hero, but the moment itself felt strangely distant now, like watching someone else's memory. The video loaded, showing a woman with intense eyes and a confident smile. Alexandra Novak, rising star of investigative journalism, who vanished without a trace during the pandemic lockdowns of 2020. Something about her made Jordan's chest tight, though he couldn't say why. He'd been following her case obsessively for months, spending hours on forums, collecting data, building theories. He opened his case folder, organized with a precision that seemed beyond his usual habits. The main document was divided into sections: missing persons, financial trails, witness statements. The office carpet muffled approaching footsteps, but Jordan found himself tensing slightly before Dave's voice boomed from behind him. "Chase!" Jordan jumped, minimizing everything as his supervisor, Dave, appeared by his cubicle. Something about Dave always put him on edge, though the man had never been anything but friendly. "Those expense reports done yet?" "Almost," Jordan replied, the lie flowing smoothly. His voice shifted subtly, warmer, more engaging. "Just cross-checking the third quarter numbers. You know how Thompson gets about decimal points?" Dave laughed, exactly as Jordan somehow knew he would. "Don't remind me. Last month's audit was a nightmare." "Which you handled perfectly," Jordan added. The words came automatically, like a script he'd rehearsed. "That new system you implemented really streamlined things." Dave beamed, already walking away. "Keep up the good work, Chase." Jordan let out a breath, then noticed his hands were shaking slightly. These moments of perfect social interaction always left him feeling drained, though he couldn't explain why. He glanced at his watch. 3:42 p.m. Something about that number tickled his memory, but before he could grab hold of the thought, his phone buzzed. An email notification from an account he didn't recognize. archival.prime@encrypted.com. The subject line read, "RE, your recent interest." Jordan hesitated. He hadn't contacted anyone about the Novak case. Had he? The email contained only a link to an old news article and 3 words: "Look deeper, Jay." His cursor hovered over the link. Part of him wanted to delete the email and forget about it. That would be the sensible thing to do, the safe thing. But another part of him, A part that felt older, more certain, was already moving to click. The article loaded. Rising digital journalist Alexandra Novak investigates dark web connection to missing children cases. Jordan's head throbbed. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright, the office too quiet. He had the strange sensation of someone standing just behind him, watching over his shoulder, even though he knew his cubicle backed against a wall. "You okay there, Chase?" Sarah from accounting called from across the aisle. "You look a little pale." "Fine," he answered automatically, but his voice sounded distant to his own ears. "Just a headache." Sarah lingered, concern evident on her face. "You've been getting those a lot lately. Maybe you should see someone?" "Maybe," Jordan agreed, though he knew he wouldn't. Doctors meant questions, and lately he had too many answers he couldn't explain, like the insights he'd shared during Sarah's divorce, or why his mandatory health physical paperwork was filed with no memory of the appointment. His screen flickered, and for a moment he thought he saw another face reflected in the dark monitor. Not his own, but a woman's face with intense eyes and a confident smile. Jordan blinked, and it was gone. Jordan pushed back from his desk, suddenly needing air. The office felt too small, too confined. He grabbed his jacket, mumbling something about lunch to Dave as he hurried past. His hand brushed the cubicle wall, and for a split second, a strange image flashed through his mind. A small camera, perfectly positioned to capture Dave's office door. The thought vanished as quickly as it had come. Outside, the October wind cut through his clothes. He walked without direction, his mind racing. The Novak case had been consuming more and more of his thoughts lately. At first, it had just been curiosity, another true crime mystery to follow. But now, his phone buzzed again. 3 new emails arriving simultaneously. Red Hawk. Stop digging. Now. They've noticed the pattern in your searches. Archivist. Prime. Check the blockchain transactions from March 42nd, 20. Follow the shell companies. Blue Jay. Remember the coffee shop. You know which one. The window seat. "I didn't subscribe to anything," Jordan muttered, staring at his phone. "I didn't—" A sudden image hit him like a physical blow. A coffee shop window, steam fogging the glass. Alexandra Novak's face in profile as she met with someone. The image felt real, vivid. The smell of espresso, the screaming steam wand, the rough patch on a wooden chair where someone had carved initials. Jordan stumbled, catching himself against a wall. His head was pounding now, the world tilting strangely. He looked up, getting his bearings, and froze. Across the street stood Groundwork Coffee, the shop from his vision. The same worn brick facade, the same green awning, the same window seat where Alexandra had— "No," Jordan whispered. "That's not— I've never—" But his feet were already moving, carrying him toward the cafe. Inside, the barista looked up with a smile of recognition that made Jordan's stomach lurch. "Hey, stranger. Haven't seen you since—" The barista's smile faltered. "Wait, sorry, I thought you were someone else." Jordan gripped the counter, steadying himself. "Someone else?" "Yeah, you look just like—" The barista shook her head. "Never mind. What can I get you?" "I've never been here before," Jordan said, but even as the words left his mouth, certainty flooded through him. The bathroom down the hall to the right, the loose floorboard by the window seat, the electrical outlet that didn't work at the corner table. He knew the barista's name was Maya, that she worked Tuesday afternoons, that she had a cat named Pixel, and was taking night classes in computer science. The knowledge settled in his mind like it had always been there, waiting to be remembered. Maya making someone's usual drink, double espresso, splash of oat milk. The music volume dropping during important conversations. A warning about a suspicious man asking questions. Maya's careful positioning at the counter. Her perfectly timed coffee spills interrupting unwanted approaches to the window table. The corner table, where Alexandra Novak had sat, typing frantically on her laptop, glancing over her shoulder every few minutes. Where she'd met with sources about missing children and cryptocurrency trails. Where she'd realized she was being watched. The memory was crystal clear now. Alexandra sitting there 3 months before she disappeared, meeting with a trembling woman who worked at one of the educational facilities. The woman had pushed a USB drive across the table, her hands shaking so badly she'd knocked over her cup. Maya had cleaned it up without being asked, deliberately taking her time, making sure no one could approach the table during the handoff. Jordan walked to the table as if in a trance. There was a scratch in the wood surface, 3 parallel lines. Without thinking, he ran his finger along them, remembering making them with a key, a signal, a warning. He yanked his hand back. Not his memory. It couldn't be his memory. But he could feel the key in his hand, remember the precise angle needed to make the marks look like ordinary wear. Could hear Alexandra's voice. If anything happens to me, the dead man switch. His phone buzzed again. One new email, Archivist Prime. You're remembering? We knew you would. The coffee shop was our last safe meeting point, before we had to become you. Attached was a video file. The thumbnail showed Alexandra Novak, sitting at this very table, looking directly into the camera. The timestamp read 3:42. Behind her, through the window, Jordan could see Maya wiping down tables, keeping watch in her own subtle way. Had she known? Had she been part of it? Jordan's hands shook as he pressed play. The cafe seemed to fade around him, the present moment blurring with memory, or whatever these fragments were that kept surfacing in his mind. If you're watching this, Alexandra's voice was tight with tension, then you've started to remember, and they've probably already noticed. Be careful. Trust the system. They're trying to protect. The video cut off. Jordan stared at the blank screen, his reflection overlaying where Alexandra's face had been. For a moment, they seemed to merge, features blending, impossible and familiar all at once. The headache intensified, and with it came a voice, not his own, but somehow inside his head. We need to move. Now. They're coming. Jordan looked up.